Warren Buffett he's the CEO. For those of you who don't know, he's usually in the top three wealthiest men in America. Oftentimes in the world, he pivots and wavers now with this tech space. He used to be the richest man in the world, and then Bill Gates and them came out. But he's always been rich. And he lives in Omaha, Nebraska, in the house that he's been living in for the last 50 plus years. He lives a very modest life. He doesn't leave money to his kids. He's very, not frugal, but he's mindful that people have to earn their keep in this world. He's the CEO of something called Berkshire Hathaway. And this company has predicted for the last 50 years, not predicted, but they've invested in things that have exponentially grown. And that's how he's built his wealth, through the stock market, right? I think one share of Berkshire Hathaway is something like how much is like $50,000, something really ridiculous. It's out of my price range. My goal is to buy maybe one share Berkshire Hathaway one day, or maybe not. Maybe that model of stock, and this is what I want to talk to you about. It's Tech Tuesday here. Yeah. Maybe his methods, because there's an insider trading game that is legal. Right, where people know some things about some things, and they also build industry that they then invest in. You know what I'm saying? And so they create this kind of bubble of wealth, of generational wealth, that many of us do not participate in. And thank you, Charles. $265,797 a share. Yeah, I probably will not be purchasing a share of Berkshire Hathaway anytime soon. That said, Warren Buffett sits in a particular, very unique space that many of us probably will never be in. So they had a shareholders meeting. At the meeting, some directors from New York said that they should, as a company, have a rule in place to make sure that when they're hiring CEOs and other officers, that they include women and people of color, right? And right. What did you see that Buffett said in response to that, Drew?
So Warren Buffett, they had the shareholders meeting, and this group of folks said, hey, we want to employ what is very similar to what happened in the NFL called the Rooney Rule. Lots of corporations across the country have started to deploy what's called the Rooney Rule, which folks on the other side of that conversation typically say hiring from a diverse slate. That means that if you were going to hire someone for a job, you will not make a person an offer until you have at least one woman candidate, one person of color candidate on your slate of candidates to which you will choose from. That is that's the Rooney Rule from the NFL. They said, we're not going to hire another head coach or whatever the case is unless we have at least one minority in the candidate pool, because the thinking is that if you only have 5 candidates and all 5 candidates are white, you're never going to get to any level of diversity. So at the very least, if you have a woman on the slate and you have a person of color on the slate, there's a chance that a diverse person can get that job. And your job is to look until you find qualified people to get onto that slate. Warren Buffett's team.
Wait, hold on because I want to just get back to the Rooney Rule. They were forced. The NFL they were forced into that. Johnny Cochran and several other lawyers threatened to sue them because they were. How do you have a league 70% of whom are black people, black men, and no black coaches? I think there was like 1 or 2. Guess how many black coaches? That was 17 years ago. They were forced. The NFL was forced into having this rule that stated that if they hire, they have to have at least a black person interviewing for the job, right? How many? So that was 1 or 2 blacks were in the coaching ranks when the Rooney Rule came into effect. How many are there today, Drew? How many black men are coaching in the NFL today?
I don't know. I can name at least 4.
No, 8. There were 8, and then 5 got fired. Yeah. So there's, Mike Tomlin, Pittsburgh Steelers. Somebody from the Cleveland, I think the Cleveland Browns has a head coach that's black, and I'm gonna add Ron Rivera. I'm gonna say he's Hispanic, but I'm gonna say he's black for kicks and giggles. Right. The same number of black coaches are in the league out of 32 teams. By the way, 32 teams. Yeah. There are 3 black people coaching today, which is similar to the today, 2020, right now. So my question is, can you force somebody to do something they're not inclined to do? I don't care what kind of rule. We know that there's affirmative action. We also know that affirmative action benefits who? White women. White women benefit from affirmative. It was designed for black people specifically, but who has benefited? White women. So thank you, Brian Flores from Miami. All right, so those are the three coaches in the NFL. If we're looking at this, Warren Buffett was like, I agree with the sentiment, but I don't think we should be forced into doing it. Is that what you heard him say?
Yeah, essentially Warren Buffett said diversity is a good idea for all of y'all. But as for me and my house, we're going to do what the fuck we want to do, right? I mean, that's essentially what he said. He said that we have made the decisions that we've made, and the decisions that we have been making have given great dividends back to you, the shareholders, all these years. Don't mess with our method. Don't mess with our recipe. Don't tell us what to do. We will always be mindful of diversity. And here's the thing about that is I believe that people don't do diversity because it's the right thing to do or because they want to do it. When people do diversity, 9 times out of 10, they are doing it because somebody has forced them to do that or somebody has incentivized them to do that. So the companies that do diversity incredibly well are typically companies where compensation is tied to diverse teams and or they have very clear-cut rules, strict rules in their ranks around things like hiring from diverse slates, around diversity scorecards, around not only when you are hiring from a diverse slate, but you have a diverse slate of interviewers interviewing candidates, right? Because there's so many times when I walk into an organization and if I don't see any other black people, I look for the black folks head count, right? I want to know, I don't want to come to corporate America and be the Rosa Parks of this company in 2000.
Or the Jackie Robinson, right?
Or the Jackie Robinson or the whomever, you know? Like I feel like that at this point, that's not my job to do that. If a company doesn't respect diversity at this point, it's probably not going to be a place where I can thrive. And so the fact that it's Warren Buffett who has said this is important. Now, I am all for what Larry Favors has said, and I wrote it down in a notebook and I put it on my whiteboard in my makeshift office, where she says we have to stop valuing whiteness. We have to begin the process of devaluing whiteness, right? And this isn't about devaluing whiteness with Warren Buffett. In this instance, Warren Buffett is an executive who happens to be white and happens to be an old white man. But there are 3 people in corporate America, when they say something, all the rest of corporate America reacts and responds instantly. That's Warren Buffett, because he has made exponential amounts of money and he is the Oracle of Omaha. People look to Warren Buffett when they want to understand how to make money in the stock market. Warren Buffett has been right probably about 98% of the time when he has made a decision, and people listen to that and they say that's the model that they want. The second person is Larry Fink. Larry Fink is the CEO of BlackRock. BlackRock has $7 trillion under investment management. Larry Fink sends out his annual letter at the top of the year, and every other CEO whose stocks are in BlackRock's portfolio, they fall the hell in line. Larry Fink said in January that climate change was one of the most important things that was going to happen, as one of the most important things that is impacting the world. And you had airlines talking about they were going to be carbon negative by a certain date. You have people jumping in line talking about, I've got to get my shit together on climate change, right? Because Larry Fink wrote one letter. The third person is Jamie Dimon. Jamie Dimon is the CEO of JP Morgan Chase. Jamie Dimon is a billionaire. He is a person who made $1 billion getting up, going to work at a job every day. That is how good he is at that particular job. He made $1 billion working a 9 to 5. Right? That 9 to 5 happens to be CEO of JP Morgan Chase, which is the largest bank in the United States. But when those 3 white guys say something, all of the other white guys who run big corporations, because that's the majority of who runs big corporations, they fall the hell in line behind that. The reason why it's disappointing at best that Warren Buffett has said this is because people in power listen to him. And if Warren Buffett is saying diversity is great for everybody else, we should all aspire to it, but we are not going to put anything in place in writing specifically, that's a problem.
Well, he said the reason why is because they're already doing it. So I don't want to be mandated to do it. And as I was, I kind of operate under this edict that if you don't want me, then I don't want you. You don't like me, I don't like you.
Yeah.
If you don't want all of this goodness, that's fine. I'm going to go over here and you're going to be mad because you're going to want this goodness. And then I'm going to say, like, I feel like we spend too much time wanting to be part of something that, as we know, wasn't designed for us to be successful to begin with.
Yeah.
And if they have their check, and again, I got into the Daily News on some affirmative action stuff. They were sued by four black journalists for racism. It's the first paper in the history, which I didn't know when I got there, to lose a lawsuit around racism because most are smart enough to settle out of court. The Daily News fought it and lost. And so when I came in, I had no idea that, I'm 21, don't know anything, no experience, and they hired me. Do you know what I'm saying? At the time, I thought I was the ish, but they checked the box. They didn't know who I was. They didn't know what I was bringing. And they banked on me being young and dumb enough to be just happy to be there. They didn't bank on me being who I became, who I ended up, rolling into. But the point I'm making is having a checkbox doesn't bring in the best and the brightest, doesn't make your company good if all you're doing is diversity for diversity's sake, because we bring a lot to the table when we're our full authentic selves. We bring a lot to a company when we're able to explore ourselves and not be facsimiles or carbon copies of white people, the kind that they're comfortable with. You know what I'm saying.
Or the kind who only wants there to be one, right?
Right.
And here's the deal about that is part of it is I'm a big champion for diversity, but I'm also a big champion of people being their authentic self and finding places that allow them to be their authentic self, because assimilation is exhausting. And for people of color, you can look at us in those corporate spaces, in the corporate spaces where you have to assimilate. Most of those folks, no matter how hard they're working, they are exhausted, right? And so I say that diversity has to also not just be about diversity, but it has to be about equity and inclusion as well, right? And so you have to be, and for you to be in a space where you feel included, that's a culture thing. That is a culture thing, right? And on the flip side of that, though, I don't think that while I don't think diversity for the sake of diversity is the answer, I think it's better than nothing.
Okay, because, and let's have that conversation. I feel like Warren Buffett's thumb is on the scale, and in so many ways, even if we get in, I don't know how much impact we'll have. Like as he said, their business is good. They're doing very well. You're spending $250,000 for one share. He's good. He doesn't want to change. He doesn't need to change. And you can't really make him change. So what's the recourse? And my question is, how do we build a business like that? Like Berkshire Hathaway? Like, I don't want to be a part of his business. I want to build a business that has that kind of power. How do we do that?
Part of what I was thinking is the fact that the data actually disagrees with Warren Buffett. And then some people will say, oh, well, Buffett isn't saying that he doesn't want diversity. He doesn't want the measure. Well, measurement is accountability. So my thinking is that it's not that he doesn't want the measure. He doesn't want to be held accountable for it, right? And so, but the data says something totally different from what Warren Buffett said. Where every time we have done, I say we, the collective industry has looked at diversity and inclusion. The McKinsey study keeps coming up over and over. And I posted this on my Twitter earlier, is that companies with more cultural and ethnic diversity on their leadership teams, this is the C-suite executives, they're 33% more likely to see better than average profits. Every time diversity has been looked at by independent organizations, they always find that more diverse teams are more profitable. That's point blank, period. That's what the data says. corporations look at data to make decisions on everything else and make rubrics, and they make policies around that data on everything else except for diversity. So you think about this at the board level. More ethnically diverse companies were 43% more likely to see above average profits. 43% more likely if you have an ethnically diverse board. 33% more likely to be to outpace profits, average profits, if you have diversity at the executive level. So if we're looking at data and making decisions based on data in every other aspect of business, why is it that diversity is like, we're not going to listen to the data?
Because it's because it's my company, and you're not going to tell me who I can and cannot hire. And
but
listen,
not.
When you're publicly traded, I hear what you're saying.
Yeah,
I hear what you, and I agree with you wholeheartedly. I just feel like as a person who was black in America, listen, without affirmative action, my career probably never would have taken off. So I'm grateful for the accountability. At the same time, on the flip side, I also recognize, like, I have a diverse company without somebody making me do it, right? Because that's my heart. That I'm going to hire who's going to bring the work to the forefront, right? But I can't imagine if somebody told me I had to have, something about somebody telling you what to do.
Yeah.
I know you're 100% correct. I know you're right. And I sit here again as a beneficiary of a policy that forced that particular seat that I came into the Daily News under had to be a black person.
Yeah.
I didn't know that until I got there, and my boss told me you're only here because you're black. I was like, oh, okay.
Affirmative action changed the life of my family. My father was hired at Exxon Company USA because of affirmative action, because if they did not hire black managers, they went out and looked for black managers because they were going to lose their tax credits if they did not hire black people. My father went from being a chemistry teacher and a band director to being a chemist on an oil rig. My father's salary tripled overnight. It tripled overnight. He had access to a pension, stock options, the best health care that our family could have asked for living in Sandy Hook, Mississippi, right? My father put all three of his kids and two of my cousins through college on that job and the gains that he made from that job. And that was an affirmative action thing. And so you can't tell me that affirmative action.
No, listen, as you're talking, we have to separate emotion and how we feel from facts and data and stats. You gave the numbers, 43% more success.
Above average profits when you have a diverse board of directors, 33% more likely to have above average profits when you have a diverse leadership team.
And you got a personal story. I even have a personal story of success because of the But when they brought up the Rooney Rule, I just had to screw face because the NFL has been playing, because you could play games. You could tell somebody, like the Daily News didn't have really too many choices. That seat was not going to get filled unless it was by a black person. So you weren't going to have a staff member come on to that seat. They didn't do that in the NFL. They're not saying unless 50% of the coaches are black, you don't get to fill that seat. They just said you have to interview, which I think is bogus, right? That's letting people off the hook. Unless they said 32 teams, 10 of them teams have to have a black coach, or we lose $1 billion, we got to give it to the players union, or something, like put some, or in this case, if Warren Buffett doesn't have 5%, I don't know, what is the percentage currently at Berkshire Hathaway? How white is it? How white is it? Do we know? Can we know? Because it's publicly traded. We should be able to know, right?
Yeah.
866, and he says we're already doing it. Well, let's look into that. 866-801-8255. Let's take some calls. People have been holding on. I'm going to head over to, let's see, Dwayne in Georgia. Thanks for holding.
Miss Karen Hunter, how are you?
Blessed and highly favored.
Exactly. I've been listening to you for a hot minute. I love you to pieces. And the reason why I'm calling is the jogger down here in Georgia.
Yes, the gentleman who was chased by a couple of white people who they found the folks that killed him?
I mean, they had the people that killed him from day one, but what is so troublesome to me is the fact that no one's been charged, and now there's an actual video of the incident. And
Wow.
and with that being said, Facebook, I went ahead and put a video on Facebook. I asked all of my friends to watch this, and I gave the phone number to the police department asking them, what are you going to do about this? We need answers. And I have been calling for the past 4 hours every 30 minutes, and I'm getting the same response, but
they said they have made no arrests. So I don't know what the video is showing. I'm not on Facebook, and I'm leery of Facebook videos because you can do deep fakes and a host of other things that they have not necessarily. They said they've outlawed, but I don't trust it. But you said there's a video of the two where you see the faces of the assailants?
You actually see him jogging and the people jumping out of their F-150s or whatever the truck is and confronting him, and you see and hear the shots, and you watch him stagger and fall to the ground. And I'm basically at a loss for words in regards to this. I just need to know what's going on and what's going to happen. And with that being said, Drew, my man, Karen, I love you to pieces, and if I wasn't married, I would scoop your behind up in a minute. But that's a whole nother conversation. People, we got to get together. I love you, and I love us.
Well, thank you.
Have a good day.
You too, sweetie. I appreciate that. I'm very heavy, though, so if you scoop in, I hope your muscles are strong and your back is strong, because I don't want to hurt nobody out there. Drew McCaskill, the young man, we talked about him a couple of weeks ago, Ahmaud Arbery, 25 years old, killed February 23rd in a neighborhood outside of the city of Brunswick. Are you familiar with that area?
I know where Brunswick, Georgia is. Brunswick is not that far from Atlanta.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
And he was killed apparently by two people. A Georgia prosecutor said today that he wants a grand jury to consider criminal charges. But have they picked up anybody? I don't see where they actually arrested anyone.
It's I would say
case.
if you have not seen the video, I'm of the camp like viewer beware, because it is hard to watch. I typically don't like to let that kind of stuff seep into my psyche. I know the people who are of the mindset that you should watch it and you should be appalled and feel all of the feelings. I can feel all the feelings without actually seeing someone being murdered.
Right.
So I can be outraged without that. I would just say, your caller said, hey, people should watch the video. I think you should, particularly in the times we're living in right now, only watch that if you feel like you can handle it.
Okay.
I would just say that.
That's fair. And it doesn't, it falls in line with what we're talking about. This period has really exposed a lot that's wrong with this country, and a lot that's wrong with human beings. And I'm putting up air quotes around human beings that live in this country, right? That you could take somebody's life. And I'm also talking about the Family Dollar security guard who only asked, so it's white people, it's black people. Those were black people that killed that man, who asked him to put a mask on. They didn't like how he talked to him. Like, y'all gotta, not y'all, because I'm not talking to the people who are listening to this show, but that people are so fragile that they can't be asked to do something to protect themselves and others without catching an attitude and then going back and getting your husband and your brother, whatever, to come back, your son, to come back and then shoot a man in the head. Like, I don't really understand that mentality. I don't get it. I really don't. I don't even know what commentary to have on it, because it just makes no sense. Let's go to Curtis.
If there's ever a petition for to make the folks in law enforcement in Georgia to do something about this, let me know where it is. Sign me up, because the fact that they haven't hunted these folks down and arrested them for
murder,
just
yes,
literally
cold-blooded
murdering
murder,
this man.
first degree, got to be
murder.
cold-blooded murder.